Galactic Empire panics. That ship's not in any archives and it's moving fast. HFY. Sci-fi story: the Galactic Empire had always been in control. The Empire's borders were vast, stretching across countless stars, planets, and systems. Ships came and went every day, each arriving according to a strict schedule, each with a history, a purpose. But this ship, this unknown ship, didn't belong. Captain Cade Rivers stood in front of the large glass window of the command bridge aboard the Imperial flagship Invictus. The stars outside twinkled like tiny lights in the dark, but something felt off. His fingers drummed on the edge of the console in front of him as he stared at the massive ship on the sensor screen. The ship wasn't like any he had seen before. It was enormous, far bigger than any known craft, and its shape was nothing the Empire had in its archives. It was sleek and almost fluid in its design, a strange mix of ancient architecture and advanced tech. Yet there were no records, no data. Nothing. Captain Rivers, a voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see Commander Alia Fisk, his second-in-command, standing nearby, her expression grim. It's moving fast. At least 4 times the speed of our fastest ships, and it's not slowing down. Cade narrowed his eyes. The Empire's fleet was known for its superior technology, its speed, and firepower. But this was something else. "Get me a comm link with Fleet Command," he ordered. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of urgency. They had to know what was going on. The Empire did not take kindly to unregistered ships appearing out of nowhere. Moments later, the flickering face of Admiral Chain appeared on the screen. His face was weathered and stern, but his eyes held concern. "Captain, what do you have?" Cade leaned in, his gaze fixed on the sensor data. "We've encountered a ship that doesn't exist in any archives. It's unlike anything we've seen before. No records, no classification, and it's heading straight for the core of the Empire." The Admiral's brows furrowed. "That's not possible. We keep track of every ship in the galaxy. You must be mistaken." "I wish I were," Cadet replied. "But the data doesn't lie. This ship is moving far faster than any of our fleets. We can't match its speed, and we can't catch up." He paused. "Sir, I think it's time we took a closer look. I want to board that ship." Admiral Chain's face hardened. "I don't need to remind you of the risks, Captain. The Empire cannot afford to have an unknown ship entering its space. We need to neutralize the threat. You will get 1 chance to board and investigate. After that, we're opening fire." Cade didn't flinch. "Understood, sir." The comm link cut off, and Cade turned to his crew. "Prepare a boarding party. We'll find out what this ship is and why it's here. Stay sharp." "We don't know what we're dealing with?" Hours later, Cade and his team stood on the airlock of the Invictus, suited up in combat gear. He was accompanied by a small group of soldiers and engineers, each carefully selected for their expertise. As the airlock hissed open, Khadi felt a strange shiver run down his spine. He had been in battle countless times before, faced down enemies of all shapes and sizes, but this felt different. The ship they were boarding was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its hull was smooth, gleaming under the artificial light, yet it gave off a strange energy, as if the ship itself was alive. The door slid open silently, and Cade stepped forward, his boots making no sound as he moved across the strange surface. Inside, the ship was eerily quiet, the air thick with an unsettling stillness. There were no crew members to be seen, and the ship's lights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Cade's heart rate picked up. Something wasn't right. "Keep your eyes open," Kade ordered. He could hear the tension in his voice. They didn't know what they were walking into, and he didn't like it one bit. The team moved cautiously through the narrow corridors, their footsteps muffled by the soft material beneath them. The walls were covered in strange symbols, none of which Kade recognized. It looked like an ancient language etched into the surface with precision. But who would leave such markings on a ship like this? They reached a control room, its large glass-like panels glowing faintly. Katie stepped forward, pressing a button on the side of the door. It slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the ship's heart. The room was filled with strange alien technology, consoles, buttons, and holograms that flickered in the air. None of it made sense. There were no readable manuals, no guides. It was as if the ship's creators had expected the occupants to know exactly what to do with it. "Anyone have any idea what we're looking at?" Cade asked, glancing at his engineers. One of the engineers, a young woman named Liara, stepped forward, her fingers brushing against one of the panels. "It's incredible. I've never seen anything like this. It's advanced far beyond our tech." Cade frowned. "But how? Who built this? And why is it here?" A soft beep interrupted his thoughts. Liara's eyes widened. "Captain, I think it's responding to us. The ship, as if on cue, hummed to life. The panels began to glow brighter, and the walls seemed to shift ever so slightly. Cade felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It was as though the ship itself was awakening after a long slumber. "Get away from that," Cade ordered, but it was too late. The ship seemed to react to the movement, as if it recognized the presence of intruders. Suddenly the walls seemed to pulse with energy, and a low hum filled the air. Cade and his team stepped back, eyes wide in shock. "Is it alive?" one of the soldiers whispered. "I don't know," Cady replied, his voice grim.
He turned to Liara.
"Shut it down! Whatever this is, we need to stop it." But the ship didn't respond to her commands. Instead, it seemed to be waiting for something or someone. Cade's gaze swept the room. This ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a mystery. And he was no closer to solving it. The comms crackled to life, and Admiral Chain's voice filled the air. "Captain Rivers, report. What's the status of the ship?" Cade's eyes narrowed as he glanced around the eerie control room. "We've just scratched the surface, sir. This ship isn't from any known archive. We need more time." "You don't have time, Captain. We need answers now." "We're giving you 1 hour before we open fire." Cade cursed under his breath. The pressure was mounting. He knew the Empire wouldn't wait forever. But one thing was certain. Whatever this ship was, it wasn't a threat. Not yet. It was something far more important. And he was going to find out what. The atmosphere inside the mysterious ship had shifted. The humming energy that filled the walls seemed to throb with a sense of purpose, as if the vessel itself was alive, aware of the intruders who had dared board its decks. Captain Cade Rivers stood in the center of the control room, his hand gripping his weapon tightly. His team, tense and uncertain, surrounded him, each soldier on edge as they watched the alien technology pulse with light. "What in the hell is happening?" Cade muttered under his breath. The ship had suddenly come to life. Where once it had been dormant and unresponsive, now it hummed with an eerie energy, the walls shifting and adjusting as though they had a mind of their own. The panels, which had been dark and unyielding, now lit up in strange, shimmering colors. The symbols that covered the wall seemed to move as though alive, shifting into new patterns with every passing second. Liara, the young engineer, stared at the main console, her face lit by the glow of the alien screens. "Captain, I don't understand." "The ship's systems are functioning, but they're not like anything I've ever seen. It's almost as if they're learning from us." Cade frowned, his mind racing. "Learning from us?
What do you mean?"
Liara pointed to a screen that displayed lines of code. "It's adapting. When I interact with it, the system changes. It's reacting to our presence, almost like it knows we're here, knows what we're doing. This ship is not just a vessel, it's a living entity." Cade's eyes narrowed. "I thought we were dealing with an abandoned ship? Now you're telling me it's alive?" "I don't know what to tell you, Captain," Liara said, shaking her head in disbelief. "It's not like anything I've ever studied. It's beyond us." The team stood in tense silence, the weight of the discovery pressing down on them. Katie knew that they were dealing with something far greater than they had anticipated. The ship's sudden activation, its ability to adapt and respond, left him with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just an old warship or a lost vessel. It was something much older, much more advanced, and possibly far more dangerous. "All right," Katie said, breaking the silence. "We need to find out what this ship is capable of. Liara, keep working on the systems. The rest of you, stay alert." The soldiers nodded, weapons at the ready, as they spread out across the room. Cade paced the length of the control room, his boots silent on the smooth surface beneath him. The walls, which had once been cold and uninviting, now seemed almost welcoming, the soft glow casting strange shadows across the floor. The entire ship seemed to be alive, breathing, with a rhythm that felt unnatural. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the ship. It was a low, vibrating hum, the sound of metal twisting and shifting. Caid immediately turned, his hand going to his sidearm. "What was that?" one of the soldiers whispered, his eyes wide with concern. "I don't know," Cade said, his voice low and steady. "But stay sharp. This ship isn't just a machine. It's more than that." Another hum, louder this time, reverberated through the walls. The lights flickered, and the air in the room seemed to grow thick, heavy. Cade's instincts were screaming at him to get out of there, but he couldn't. They had come too far. He had to understand what they were dealing with. His team had to know what this ship was before it reached the heart of the Empire. "Liara," Cade called, turning to the engineer. "What's happening?" Liara's hands flew over the controls, her face a mask of concentration. I'm not sure. It's like the ship is reacting to our presence, like it's trying to communicate. Katie felt a chill run down his spine. Communicate? With who? I don't know, Captain, Liara said, her voice tight with frustration. But there's something here, something ancient, even. The technology we're seeing, it doesn't belong to any civilization I've ever heard of. It's beyond anything the Empire has ever created. The air in the room grew colder, and Cade's breath came out in small clouds. The energy of the ship seemed to gather, building with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Then, in an instant, the entire ship went silent. The panels went dark. The lights flickered and died. For a moment, it felt as if the ship had completely powered down. Then, without warning, a deep resonating voice filled the room. It was not a voice, exactly, but a feeling, a sensation, as if the ship itself was speaking directly to their minds. Who are you? Cade froze. The voice was unlike anything he had ever heard. It wasn't spoken, it was felt deep within his chest, reverberating through his bones. His eyes widened and he looked at his team. They were all staring at him, their faces pale with shock. Did you hear that? One of the soldiers whispered, his voice shaking. Cade didn't answer. He was too busy trying to process what had just happened. The ship had spoken, not in words, but in thoughts. And it had asked a question. Who are you? Coddy's mind raced. We're here to investigate, he said out loud, his voice steady despite the confusion swirling in his mind. We're here to understand. The voice came again, this time clearer, more direct. Why do you seek knowledge? Cadet swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to say. They had boarded the ship to learn about its origin, to understand what it was, but now it felt like the ship was probing their very souls. We need to know what this ship is, Cade said, his voice filled with conviction. We need to know who built it and why. The voice didn't respond right away. For a moment, the silence was deafening, and Cade felt a growing unease in the pit of his stomach. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and the ship began to hum once more. The panels came to life, glowing softly in the dim light. Liara turned to Katie, her eyes wide with shock. Captain, this ship it's reacting to us. It's understanding what we're saying. Cade took a deep breath, his hand resting on his sidearm. The situation was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. The ship wasn't just a lost relic of an ancient civilization. It was a sentient being, and it was watching them, listening to them, and perhaps even judging them. We need to figure out what it wants, Cade said, his voice low and steady. We can't afford to make any mistakes. The silence that followed the ship's strange telepathic voice was deafening. Cade Rivers stood motionless, his mind still reeling from the experience. He had faced many challenges in his years as a captain, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The ship, this living, breathing alien entity, was aware of them. It was as if it knew their every thought, their every move. The control room was filled with an uneasy tension. The air felt thicker now, heavier, as though the ship itself was waiting for something. Cade could feel the eyes of his team on him, their fear evident in their expressions. They were all waiting for him to take charge, to lead them through this strange and dangerous situation. Cod took a deep breath and turned to his second-in-command, Commander Alia Fisk. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice calm despite the chaos brewing in his mind. Alia, usually confident and composed, hesitated for a moment before responding. I don't know, Captain. This ship is unlike anything we've seen. It's not just advanced technology. It's something more. It's alive." Katie nodded. He had come to the same conclusion. This wasn't just a ship. It was a living, sentient being with a purpose, one that they still couldn't understand. The fact that it had spoken to them, reached into their minds, meant that it was more than a piece of ancient technology. It was a vessel with a history, a story that they had yet to uncover.
"Liara," Cod called out.
"Any idea how we can get this thing to communicate?" Liara, the young engineer, was still at the main console, her fingers moving rapidly across the alien controls. She was focused, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I've been trying to interface with the ship's systems, Captain, but it's like it's toying with me. I can send commands, but they don't always work the way I expect. It adapts too quickly." Cade frowned. "So it's learning from us?" "Exactly," Liara replied, her voice tinged with awe. "It's as if every time we interact with it, the ship becomes more aware of us, more attuned to our presence. I've never seen anything like it." Cade's mind raced. The ship wasn't just alive, It was learning. Adapting. He couldn't let his guard down. Before he could respond, a loud mechanical sound echoed through the ship, followed by a series of rapid beeps. The lights in the control room flickered, and the ship hummed with an unfamiliar energy. Cade instinctively reached for his weapon, but something told him this wasn't an immediate threat. It was something else. Liara's eyes widened. "Captain, look at this." She pointed to a newly activated screen, one that hadn't been responsive before. On the display was a holographic map of the galaxy, but something was different. A small blinking dot was pulsing in the center, right in the heart of the Empire's territory. Kade stepped closer, his brow furrowed. "What is that?" "It's a location," Liara said, her voice trembling slightly. "The ship's systems are showing it as a place of interest. But this location doesn't exist on any maps. It's not in our archives." Katie's mind raced. He'd been expecting the ship to be a weapon, or perhaps a relic of some long-dead civilization. But this was something different. The ship was showing them something hidden, something that had been deliberately erased from Imperial knowledge. "Why would it show us that?" Cod asked, more to himself than anyone else. Alia stepped forward, her voice steady. "Because it wants us to find it." Cade turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" "I think the ship knows something we don't," Alia continued. "It's leading us somewhere. To a place that's been kept secret, maybe even from the Empire itself." The tension in the room thickened. Kay didn't know whether to trust the ship or if it had its own agenda. But one thing was clear, it wasn't just an ancient relic. It was a key to something much bigger. "Prepare the team," Cade said, his voice firm. "We're going to that location." The soldiers looked at each other, unease spreading across their faces, but they knew better than to question Cade's orders. They followed him without hesitation. Hours later, Cade and his team stood on the edge of the ship's airlock, their suits on and their weapons ready. The ship had already begun to move, heading toward the coordinates it had shown them. As they boarded the shuttle, Cade couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The unknown location was a mystery, and he wasn't sure what they would find there. The shuttle doors closed with a soft hiss, and the engines roared to life. As they flew deeper into space, Cade looked out the viewport, his eyes scanning the stars. The ship's trajectory was precise, its speed unlike anything Cade had experienced. The hum of the engines filled the silence, but Cade's thoughts were consumed by what lay ahead. What was waiting for them at this hidden location? And what was the ship's true purpose? After what felt like hours, the shuttle descended toward a small, barren planet. There was no sign of life, no cities or structures, just a desolate, rocky landscape that stretched as far as the eye could see. The ship slowed as it neared the surface, and Cade's heart raced. They were close now. Too close to turn back. The ship landed gently, its landing gear sinking into the rocky ground with a soft thud. Cade's team immediately disembarked, their boots crunching against the dry surface. They were in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing here, not even a sign of civilization, just endless stone and dust. But the ship, this living vessel, was clearly here for a reason, and Cade had to find out what that reason was. "Spread out," Cade ordered. "We need to find what the ship wants us to see." The team moved cautiously, their eyes scanning the surroundings. As they ventured deeper into the barren landscape, Cade's communicator beeped. It was Liara. "Captain, I found something," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "There's a structure here. Something ancient." Cade's heart skipped a beat. "A structure? In the middle of nowhere?" "Where?" he asked, his voice urgent. "About 100 meters to the north. There's something buried under the ground, but I think it's starting to come to life." Cade didn't hesitate. "Lead the way." "We're going in." They moved quickly, their steps quickening as they neared the location. And then, as they rounded a rocky outcrop, they saw it. A massive, half-buried building, covered in dust and ancient markings. The walls were etched with symbols, similar to those they had seen on the ship. But this was different. This was a tomb, a place of burial. And inside, Cade knew they would find the answers to the ship's strange behavior. The sun hung low in the sky as Cade Rivers and his team approached the ancient structure. The air felt charged, thick with the tension of the unknown. The ship, which had been their guide through this strange journey, now hovered quietly behind them, its presence as constant and unyielding as ever. But the closer they got to the massive building, the more Cade felt the weight of the decision that loomed ahead. The structure was far older than anything the Empire had ever encountered. Its walls, covered in strange symbols, pulsed with a soft, almost imperceptible glow. The ground around it was cracked and uneven, as if the very earth beneath their feet was reluctant to touch the monument. "This place is ancient," Liara whispered, her voice filled with awe. She reached out and traced a symbol on the wall. It seemed to hum under her touch, as if responding to her presence. "These markings, they match the ones inside the ship. I think this place is connected to it somehow." Katie nodded but didn't speak. He couldn't afford to get lost in the mystery. He needed answers. The Empire's fleet was still out there, waiting for him to report. He had to make a choice soon. Continue searching for the truth, or return to Empire Command with a report on a mysterious ship they could barely understand. The team entered the structure, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. The inside was a dark, sprawling hall, filled with rows of columns that seemed to stretch endlessly into the shadows. At the center there was a large circular platform, surrounded by strange, glowing artifacts. They looked like nothing Katie had ever seen before. Crystal-like structures, each one pulsing with energy. "Captain, over here," Alia called, her voice breaking the silence. Cade moved swiftly toward her. She was standing in front of a massive stone door, its surface covered with more of the alien symbols. But this time the markings seemed different. They were more intricate, more detailed, and they glowed with a faint, golden light. Katie reached out, his fingers brushing against the cold surface of the door. As soon as his hand made contact, the symbols shifted, swirling and rearranging. A low hum filled the air, and the door slowly began to open, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. The team stepped into the chamber, their eyes wide with wonder. In the center of the room stood an enormous, intricately carved pedestal. Atop the pedestal was a glowing crystalline object, beautiful and terrifying in its simplicity. It pulsed with an otherworldly energy, casting an eerie glow across the chamber. Cade felt his heart race. This was it. This was what the ship had been leading them to. "This is it," Liara breathed, her voice filled with reverence. "This is the heart of the ship. This is what it was meant to protect." Cade stepped forward, his hand hovering just above the crystal. He could feel the power emanating from it, a force unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was a power that seemed to hum with the potential for both creation and destruction. He could feel it calling to him, pulling him toward it, urging him to take it, to harness it. But at that moment, Cade's communicator crackled to life. The voice of Admiral Chain, cutting through the stillness. "Captain Rivers, report. You've had more than enough time. If you don't return to the fleet in the next hour, we'll open fire on the ship and neutralize it." Is it a threat or not? Cade's heart skipped a beat. The Admiral's voice was stern, but there was an underlying tension, a sense of impatience that Cade had never heard before. The fleet was waiting. Time was running out. Cade turned away from the crystal, his mind racing. The Empire was demanding answers. They wanted control, and they wanted it now. The choice before him was simple. Either he returned with the crystal and the answers it held, or he destroyed the ship, cutting off any possibility of understanding its true power. "Captain?" Alia's voice broke through his thoughts. "What are you going to do?" Cade glanced at his team, their faces filled with uncertainty. They had all come this far, followed him into the unknown, and now the final decision rested with him. They had discovered something incredible here, something that could change the course of history. But at what cost? He looked back at the crystal, its glow casting long shadows across the room. The power it held was undeniable, but so was the danger. If the Empire were to control it, it could shift the balance of power across the galaxy in ways Katie wasn't sure he was prepared for. It could destroy everything they had fought for. But if the Empire destroyed the ship, if they wiped out this incredible technology without understanding it, Katie couldn't allow that to happen. Not without knowing more. "I can't let them destroy it," Cade had said, his voice low but firm. "This is bigger than the Empire." "It's bigger than all of us." Alia nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. The rest of the team stood silently, each of them grappling with the same question. Was Cade right? Should they risk everything to understand the power they had uncovered, or should they protect the galaxy from the unknown? Cade's fingers hovered over the crystal, and for a moment he hesitated. But then, with a steady hand, he reached out and touched it. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy coursed through his body. It was like nothing he had ever felt before. Pure, unfiltered power rushing through his veins. His vision blurred, and the room seemed to dissolve around him. Images, flickering, ancient memories rushed through his mind. He saw civilizations rise and fall, empires crumble, and stars burn out. He saw the creators of the ship, the ancient race who had built it, their final moments etched in time. And, at the center of it all was the crystal, a key to something far greater, something that could either save or destroy everything. As the visions faded, Cadet gasped for breath, his hands shaking. He stumbled back, his mind reeling from the overwhelming flood of information. "We can't destroy it," Cade said, his voice hoarse. "But we can't let the Empire control it either. This belongs to everyone, not just one faction. We need to find a way to share it with the galaxy." Alia stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. "You're right, Captain. But how do we convince them?" Cade's gaze turned to the crystal once more. "We don't need to convince them. We'll take it back to the Empire. We'll prove that it's not a weapon. It's a new beginning."
But it's not something that can be controlled. Not by anyone.
The team stood in silence, each of them understanding the weight of the decision. There was no turning back now. Cade had made his choice. They had uncovered a secret that could change the galaxy, but they had also uncovered a responsibility to ensure that the power they had found would not be used for destruction, but for the good of all. With one last glance at the glowing crystal, Cade turned and made his way toward the exit. The future of the galaxy was in their hands now.